Alright, good afternoon everyone. This is Tony Leonard sitting in on ZBrush Live this May 25th. Welcome, welcome. Do let me know if you can hear me. And hear me okay, I suppose. I'm going to try to crank things up a little bit. Oh, sweet, sweet. Alright. Okay, well, it's been a minute since I actually jumped into ZBrush and got jamming on ZBrush Live for a minute. But I wanted to start off something sort of just like a freestyle and do something fresh for the day and see if I could do a speed sculpt inside of 2 hours. Something a little character oriented with a few hard surfacey bits. And I'm not gonna probably get too far, but we'll see how far I get. And you know, I'm very much welcome to have you guys along for the ride. So you know, if you have any questions or anything, please do let me know over the chats. I'm gonna try to pay attention to both YouTube and on Twitch. So if I don't answer questions right away, save them for next time. Sometimes I do miss them, just working and then trying to pay attention at the same time. Every once in a while I miss a few comments, but if you had any questions, just ask me again, or I'll save it and try to scrub through the questions after the post and then try to answer them again on YouTube and or Twitch. So do let me know if you guys need any information on what I'm doing, or tips on stuff like that. Let me know. Alright, so without much ado, let's kind of get a little started here. Work out just a few issues. Give me 1 second and I'll get started. Right, let's get rid of this, and yep, good to go. Alright. There we are. Alright. Yep, for some reason my screen is not showing up. Hold on a second. Interesting. Okay, I think today actually my small webcam, so you guys can see me, might have not been set right because it's not showing up, but I'm perfectly good to go otherwise. So a couple of things. Last time around, it's been a minute since I've streamed last. I've been preparing a lot of characters of late and experimenting with using sculpts, models in Mixamo, and sort of how you could use Mixamo along with Adobe's Fuse software to sort of use ZBrush in turn to sculpt up or sort of customize a character. And of course, Fuse, has some pretty neat little nifty, sort of basic guidelines on how to use how to sculpt out something, or they have like a lot of default characters in there that you can use, somewhat in template form, but you can do a lot of customizations to some of those characters. Like if you have crowds or need something really quick, or just even proportionally need a model to sort of base some things off of. So I wanted to take a look at one of those, actually. So I'm going to go back, and I'll see, actually, I believe it was this one. Yep. I'll just go in here really quick and grab it. And today should be interesting because I'm going to start sculpting, but I have recently been testing out a different tablet for use with ZBrush and anything I would need a tablet with. Sorry, Wacom. But I still have a couple of other choices, but this time around I'm using an XP pen. Should anyone ask? And if you just need like a very general tablet, it's cost effective. I would look into it because they're actually pretty cool and work well. So this was, I think, last time around I had drugged this one out. There's a female version and a male version kicked out of this. This is a model out of Fuse, right? And I just wanted to show it because just some of the things that we're going to be playing with later, if I should do something, and then bring that over to Mixamo, you want it to probably have something that's either a semi-A pose, where the arms and legs are, kind of spread out a bit, or either in a T pose, right, for a character. And what I'm doing here is actually just taking some of the parts and maybe adjusting them every once in a while. Like there are boots, pants, everything's polygrouped. But one model, and I can turn on smoothing and get some detail out of this, but I can also replace some of these parts in turn, and then sometimes also if some of these things have UVs on them, I'll manipulate or use some of the UV data and or the maps for it and sort of customize some things as far as like colors and or the UVs themselves for UV shapes. But all of these are pretty basic. There's like a head, helmet pieces here, as you can see by the different colored definitions between the polygroups. There's probably a full mouth bag and eye socket, and then there's also probably some geometry for the eyelashes. So these things, as far as like when I was talking about having a template, that's ready to go and start working on, this is actually kind of nice, because it's pretty easy to work with, right? Actually, I believe the pant legs are cupped off at the end, past the boots, so it just looks like a pant leg, but it's actually sealed manifold geometry, right? I'm pretty sure that the top is probably the same way. There we go. So if I reverse that, you can see that the end cap at the waist is cut in such a way where there's actual geometry faces closing the object off. So it's airtight, as they say, right? And that would be a manifold mesh, right? And so, of course, simply you can take these kinds of things and shape them up. I like to grab the move tool a lot, sort of reshape some things. Even if you were to edit some polys and vertices, smaller the brush, more so that you can grab an actual singular vert, right? This is something we might be dealing with later, especially if we retopologize anything. I'm going to show you kind of some basics, maybe novice level basics. And so I would say that the sculpting level on this would probably be like intermediate, and then I'll probably try to talk about a few more advanced things. But just to go through some of this, I'm going to be doing things kind of on this level, right? And about this type of poly count, right? And then I'll show you how we UV it. There's a couple of different ways that I can UV it, but I want to try to prepare something that I can fully texture for later, and use a couple of different other workflows, once I have the UVs done. I will be talking, actually in this case, because I plan on doing a character that has some hard surface bits in it, trying to mess with InstaLOD, which is a software Mike Pavlovich actually turned me on to. And it's a great bit of software, but it makes a level of detail models and crunches down polys for triangulation, so that you could easily drop it into an environment like Unreal, the Unreal Game Engine, or any other type of renderer. Like say if you're going to Marmoset, even you can use stuff there. All right, so let's get jamming. Hello. Oh, you can't see anything but the background? You can see my screen now, right? Grumble? Should be able to see it. Alright. So anyway, what I'm going to do now is just make something fresh off the bat. So I'd like to go up to Preferences, and of course, my interface might look a little bit different than the stock interface or other interfaces because I've saved my own UI. But anytime you want to pull out some of the things at the top of this list, all of you need to do from the menu is just pull the tab out, mouse over this little circular half circle with the arrow here, and it'll turn it into like that cross with the arrows. Click and drag and bring it over. And then what I'm going to do is actually initialize ZBrush, which basically starts ZBrush off from a clean slate, right? So I'm going to hit it. It's going to ask me, do I really want to initialize? And I'm going to say, hell yeah. And it's going to bring it back to go. Right? So from here, I'm going to go ahead and just load, actually not load a tool, but actually just place a tool. And I'm going to start with the Polymesh 3D because this is actually a Polymesh object, and I don't actually have to sit around and click make Polymesh 3D each time I do it. I can just go ahead and hit T and start working. And more importantly, I can hit this initialize tab here, and I can come up with something like maybe a Q cube or a Q sphere or a Q grid, which is like a 2D plane, Q cylinder. And these Q meshes are the types of meshes that you can start using the Zmodeler tools with, which is something that I want to start with as a start. So, and of course, as always, sometimes with poly editing a lot, it's not just Maya, but it's also Blender 2.8. So let's get that going. If you guys have been watching my stuff here recently, you probably know that I mess with Blender 2.8. And also Master Xenon 1001 and his box cutter and hard ops tools, which are an excellent pair for a lot of the stuff that I'm doing. So I'm going to kind of bounce back and forth, and I'll show you guys what's up. Okay, so let's just have that at the ready, Maya at the ready, and now ZBrush, right? So I'm going to hit Q cube, and maybe start pulling some polys out of this cube, and see what kind of design we can come up with. Cool. Alright. Alright. So, basics of ZBrush, of course, rotation is just, clicking in the viewport and actually rotating, panning left and right. You can also hit Shift and lock it to an orthographic view. You can also, in fact, in this case, I'm going to turn on LSIM, which is basically a function that's local symmetry. And so, I just want to make sure that my symmetry is on point at each point correctly, right? You can also see this from the transform palette, with activate symmetry turned on, and usually X is the hotkey to turn symmetry on. Otherwise, it just does things from one point, which probably is the positive X, I guess, or actually negative X. I can never remember which between left and right, but it's along the X anyway. Of course, you can turn on your floor. And get an idea of where you are. So I'm going to turn on polyframes so that I can actually see the wireframe and the faces that are polygrouped, right? So there's like 2 sides, maybe 3 sides that have different polygroup, colors on it, like the purple there. And then, of course, I'm going to go through and just hit like the floor. I'm not going to turn on dynamic perspective yet because I want it to work without perspective for just a moment, but the floor should give you an indicator of where you are. Of course, this blue line is the Z forward, X being the red line here, and Y up being the green hair at the top of the object. Just in case you ever wondered what that is, for new folks, that's what that is. Alright, so I had some music. I'm gonna play some music. It feels like a music kind of Saturday. Alright. There we go. Alright. So I'm going to hit B and Z on the keyboard and go to the Zmodeler. And I'm going to also hit X to get symmetry. And as you see here, between hitting X, a lot of the faces highlighted. Then you can see the normal here of this face. So I'm going to hit Alt and grab both. And let's see here. Alright, and I'm going to start pulling some stuff out. Q mesh, single poly. I'm going to go quarter step. And I'm just hitting the spacebar to get a lot of these. Anytime you're using the Zmodeler tool, I think I've explained these before, but you probably want to grab your view and bring it forward. And of course, Alt and tapping the Alt key while the pin is down will zoom in and out. And then spacebar for the different features. But it's not just spacebar. Actually, you want to be hovered over the component that you want the menu for when using the Zmodeler tool. So just like, for example, if you hover over the edge and hit spacebar, you're going to get all of the edge actions. Over a vertex, you're going to hit spacebar and get all of the point actions for all of the verts. And then, just hovering over a face will give you the polygonal or polygon actions for the faces, right? And so what I'm doing is just like going to do like some push-pull to different areas, adding some loops and that sort of thing. So edge, insert loop, we'll grab this. And then we'll grab this right here. See, I can use this with transpose every once in a while, but I'm actually going to pull some of these down just a little bit. Add a few more loops on the other side. And a neat trick that I can tell you can do, because this is a Q mesh, so you can grab faces like this, and if you're using Q mesh, you can sort of pull them up and bridge them to other, the next row of polys. It's kind of hard to explain, but if you pull upwards, it actually starts to snap, and I could pull it up again, and it would actually just create like an angle here, but just trying to keep everything more towards a sort of quad kind of deal. Take and put like a line there, and let's select these guys, bring this down, and that should make it cool a little bit. And every once in a while when I come up with some shapes, I like to do blockouts this way, when I do hard surface stuff, just so that I can sort of, control the polys, in a simplistic fashion this way, and then once I have a block out, I'll move it to another 3D editor, so I can, mess with the edges and the polys on a different level, perhaps. I'll make a little space here, and see if I can try a little bridging trick. Do this and this here, and pull this out, and then try it again, create another little loop, and then what I'm going to do here is grab both sides of these, and as I pull it upwards, it's going to actually snap and weld itself, so I get like a nice little handle sort of look that I can manipulate later. A couple of more loops. Keep going. This guy, bring these downward a little bit. Actually, for this, I'm going to use some masking. So I'm going to take where I believe there would be some vertices that I can pull up and mask here at the corner. And if I hold Control, and I can actually flip this by tapping on the canvas area, and then I can hit W on the keyboard and get the world space widget out. And I can reset its position by holding Alt. In fact, if you hold it Alt, you'll see that this little lock and key here unlocks itself. And then what I can do is actually can just move this over here, sort of center it generally where I want to be moving some vertices up. And then I can just pull on it, pull this up to shape. And then Control, and then dragging will, of course, clear the mask. And Q back to, drawing and editing mode. Oops. There we go. So I'm going to do this again. Oops. There we go. And then flipped. Mask. Alt to move the world space widget. And move again. Clear mask. Drawing here. Oops. There we go. Bend that downwards. Alright, and then clear the mask again. So I'm kind of thinking of something like the front end of like a Walker mech or something like that. Sort of Fuchikoma-esque kind of tank thing, which would be cool with legs. I think I have a few kits of my own stuff that have like some cool leg components that I might use for this. So I'm just gonna try it out. See how it goes. Here. There we go. And I'm gonna pull these bad boys in a little bit. Actually, that might not be too cool because of that. So let's see here. Let's figure out a way where I can pull this in. Actually, maybe take that out. Pull that way. And do this separately. Pull it sort of downwards. There we go. So that's better. Then I just have to fix this area in and around here maybe a little bit later. I think it needs a piece or something on the back because it takes a sort of weird turn there. But I'm not going to worry about it for now. I'm just going to keep going. Let's see, we'll take this space, do a little push in this way. Yep, that should be cool. And now, here's one area that I think you guys have seen me probably do before, but I want to just try it again so that, folks that are new to ZBrush can kind of grasp this. But I'm going to use actually a few insert primitives. So like if I hit B, and then hit I, I'm going to bring up all the insert meshes that, or IMMs that have like, in their naming title have IMM, and I'm going to start with these. And mostly the primitives have some really cool things in it because I actually want to use the QQ primitive, and it's just a basic cube. And so instead of having to add different shapes and then append it, I'm just going to use the insert multi-mesh of it, and then get going with it. So that I'm going to hit M and select the Q cube. I'm going to draw it squarely on somewhere, very centered. I'm going to hold shift and draw it to scale between there. And as I drew it, you notice that the rest of it gets masked. And so, you know, I can clear that mask, but actually first I want to deal with this as a very separate object to this. So of course I'm going to use the split mask points feature. I think I've added this to my own UI, but it's very easy to do. Any of the features I think that you want to add, of course you can always come over to your preferences, and I think under config, what you want to do is enable customization here. Enable customize, and of course that will allow you to, you know, bring, I believe it's either control or alt control, maybe control shift, one of those. You might want to check me on that one, but of course you can drag those menu items from various things and make your own menu palette, or you can actually drag them to the top. And I don't know if you guys knew this, it's a little bit of a trick, some know it, some don't, but there, if you hold the control button and of course scroll up at the top menu, you can actually have like an extended toolbar and add all of your features going downward. I find it kind of handy for this little bit here because some of these I use quite often, and I'm going to add it to the UI. Right? So now that I have a separate bit, I'm going to actually click this. You can see that it's been separated because the mask is now gone, and the polyframe view is only for the new IMM piece that I added. Correct? So, moving right along, look at our subtools. Here we have a fresh box, so I can start manipulating this for the rest of the shapes, right? So, I'm going to take this, maybe do this, stretch it out a bit. There we go. And I'm actually going to Zmodeler, get this edge here and do a slide, which should actually pull this down, but instead of the singular edge, I'm going to actually do edge loop complete, going all around. There we go. And actually, let's move this over back so we can have some space in between shaping it. If any way while you're working you get lost in your sketch or ZBrush sculpt, you know, and the view is like way too far and you don't know how to, you know, view everything all in the viewport, you can always hit F and it'll frame up your shape and or the model, right? So you can hit F once and it'll do probably the current subtool. If you hit it twice, it'll actually show the entire model, right? So let's put inserted edge loop here. I'm going to actually mask that off. QB. No, it's still set. Good. There we go. And I'm not going to worry about these curving out, because actually if I send them over to Maya or someplace like that, I can actually take them and sort of manipulate them, straighten them out using the scale tools there. Clear this back a little bit. Insert on both sides. There we go. Do something like this and create like another lift handle or hook on the surface of this thing. Here, here, raise this up, take these guys here. Between there, and then bridge these guys together and weld them. Again, just like I did the other part. And I'm going to take and put a loop here, just sort of to like see if I can reinforce the shape a little bit if I was to subdivide it. Naturally, of course, if you want to look at any of your objects with subdivision as you're working with Zmodeler, and I guess this sort of becomes like a little impromptu crash course on using Zmodeler, but just view your subdivisions, of course, like you would Maya, you know, like usually you hit 1 and 3, I think, to look at the poly view, and then of course the shaded, you know, like smooth view or turbo smooth view. I think Max, of course, has the same thing. Everybody has the same thing, but for here in ZBrush, of course, all you have to do is hit D, and it should actually turn on dynamic subdivision, and you can just choose yes. There we go. And it'll actually show you how things looked a little bit smooth. So wherever I placed, you know, sort of like reinforcing loops around, you know, like some of the shapes, it'll try to start to hold some of those shapes and maybe round the corners a little bit. I'm actually not going to do that for much of this. I actually want to do sort of like non-subdivided geometry, especially for later, because I'm actually going to take these shapes and start editing them in Blender and Box Cutter, and then bring them back to ZBrush, which is all the fun things. So shift, hold that there. So like, of course, again, if I hit D, click yes on this, tablet doesn't want to seem to grab that. Alright, so you know, it starts to harden the actual edge transformation between this planar surface and this transition. It'll actually take it and start to stiffen it a little bit. And the closer this loop is to this one down here, the tighter or the transition gets as far as like an actual visible edge, you know. And then of course, going back to regular poly view, Shift and D gets rid of the dynamic subdivision. You can view that tool and how many subdivision settings you have by going to Geometry, Dynamic Subdivision here, and then, oops, sorry, when you turn it on, you can actually select how many smooth subdivision levels that you want. So like, if you do 4, that's actually 5. It's actually 1 more than whichever number the slider presents. So if it says 0, it's probably going to be like, you know, at 1, and going up 1 is like 2, you know, and so forth and so on. And it actually gets smoother, because if I apply it, it'll probably not say 2 levels, it'll probably say 3, right? See here? So that I don't actually want to do, but I'm going to undo it and kind of keep this unsubdivided, right? But every once in a while, it's a nice little check to look at it. Put that in there a little bit. Actually, let's not do that. Let's put another loop this way. And then we don't have anything butting up against each other, like here. And then I'll choose these and this, and sort of pull this up and create other geometry. here. Yeah, something like that. There we go. Pull this in. There's a shape that makes at least better sense to me, edge-wise, silhouette-wise. And then I'll work out something down here a little bit more. But let's just, for example's sake, take this, undo this, right? I'm going to undo that mask because I'm done with it. I'm just going to pull this shape in, sort of pair it up, take a look at it. So that's going to be like the body of the, sort of like the thorax of the bug shape of this mech, right? And then this will be sort of like the head. You know, maybe have some greebles and whatnot on some of the pieces at the end. Maybe something also connective at the bottom. Or I could do like a cylinder shape a little bit later on. And then come up with some legs or something like that, right? So, actually, let's see here. Something like this, I'd probably doubt that I would be able to put into Mixamo. I actually have plans for doing a little bit something more humanoid in shape. And actually, I could still do that, but anything when you're working, and I don't know if I mentioned this last time working with Mixamo, but if you do something in ZBrush and you bring it over to Mixamo, probably the best thing after you solve the topology and UVing is to have something that is in human form, at least proportional to a human being. And that's because, you know, I think the way that its algorithm works to actually upload models, it needs something bipedal like a human to match some of its mocap data to. So you can't just do like crazy robot legs with, you know, gears and shocks and all of that and then throw it in there and hope for the best. It actually probably needs to be more uniform to what maybe like an ankle shape. I mean, it needs elbow markers, neck and chin, groin, and also kneecaps. So, you know, a while back ago, I think I showed you guys an alien that a friend and I were working on, and as I animated it, it actually had, you know, it actually had sort of like an inverted knee, but it was close enough to a human's to be able to walk on its own and actually accept some of the mocap data, and it looks so bizarre when it's actually walking. But I'll have to show you guys that later. So let's see. I'm gonna do that as the body, that is the head. We're gonna move this, maybe scale it a bit. Take this guy, bring this outwards a little bit. Of course, you know, you can actually kit bash some pieces from here. You know, make your own insert multi-mesh brushes and stuff like that. It makes sort of like a quick little way to add pieces and detail and add to the silhouette. I, for example, have some of my own that I've made over time. Let's see, which one did I want? I think I wanted this one. Or, actually, no. Had a new batch. Forgot where I put it. Should be on this machine. Let's try it here. Okay. So I've got some jointed parts that I think I can use here. Maybe like this. We'll get some legs going or something. Maybe when I do things like this, I always try to pull them away from the model so I can separate them, but I also I'm trying to think of, I mean, as a sketch, how things are going to move, and so I'm thinking about what I can connect to this joint a little bit. And of course, I can kind of turn on that axis. So maybe something is connected to here, and then more sort of thorax or carapace of the insect shape, and then pull this out, and then I'll extend a leg down this way. Of course, with, because it's an insert multi-mesh, I want to make sure to have it as a separate subtool, so split mask points while the mask is still active. Shift F to get rid of the polyframe. And of course, if I want to keep balance, I can actually hit Control, Shift, and if I click on this axis, which is the... Actually, it's a little bit wrong from where it suggests, but I'm actually going to be moving on the Z forward, going back towards the end, and I'm going to hit Shift and Control, or actually Control Shift rather, and move this over and do a duplicate. And of course, this is masked because this is a whole new object, but of course I can again hit split masked points. And might want to take and hold Alt and just flatten that, so I can actually rotate these a little bit and move them outwards just a pinch. And the same for these guys. Actually, I can hold Alt and select these, move this up, come around the other side of the view, and hit Alt and rotate, and make sure that's level before I try to turn these. There we go. And then just move this forward. There we go. And just as some management, I'm going to actually take these leg pieces here, and just as because they're the same piece, I'm going to actually group them back together. Sorry, I'm actually not seeing the questions. If anybody has comments, I should take a look. BMS, which did you not? Was there a part that you didn't know that you were curious to see? But otherwise, I'm gonna keep moving. Add a few more pieces. Let's see. I'll take some of these leg structure pieces of mine and add them in. That's a cool one. That one's plain too. So I want to line them up so that at least they get applied towards the same sort of axis. And then sort of eyeballing its look. There it is, and then I'm going to take that and pull it out. Of course, if you ever want to use the Transpose Line in addition to using the World Space widget, I often now mess with the both, but like I use the World Space widget quite a bit. But you can toggle it. You can toggle it by hitting Y and getting just like the regular Transpose Line, and of course its axis is all labeled here by these little circles. And of course, you can use them as measuring ticks. And the measuring ticks, I think you can actually set to an actual specific unit if need be. And I believe there's a way, this little white piece at the end, I believe if you click on it, it actually orients the transpose line to the camera angle that you're presently at. Don't take my word for it, but actually, if you go and look on the ZBrush docs, there should be a good explanation on, what parts are what for this transpose line, because sometimes I know it can be confusing, but I believe that's what that little white circle does at the bottom. And of course, moving it around, you want to grab the center so that you don't pull it. Like if you do this, of course you're going to move the object around freely, and I think this would be the end and this would be the top, so it'll actually scale it, I believe, is if you try to move it. So therefore, when I'm moving pieces around, I always like to hit Y and then just go ahead and use like the world space, right? Because I can kind of control some angles and stuff like this. still at the same applied angle, and then push it back and down, and sort of just start to piece together kit bash stuff. Get some nice quick looks and stuff like that, right? So I'm going to split this off, and I can duplicate these. Split that. Oops. There we go. Turn it. This piece intersecting with that. And of course, you know, having, I think I've designed something very similar to this a couple of streams back, but just to sort of show you, you know, this is kind of the start of how I start to plot out something, especially for hard surface stuff. You know, having like just a structure piece to sort of give direction of shape and form. Maybe add in a couple of roll bars or something like that. Let's do this. Pen and grab a Z-sphere. And with this guy, I'm going to tap it, hit E, scale it down, turn on the transparency so I can see it. And I'm just going to move it over, hitting W. Right about there, maybe. Someplace non-intrusive, you know, like maybe have it come out of the side somewhere. Okay, but definitely on the X, as you can see, that red hairline there is sort of the direction that I'm going to actually mirror from. And so when I do this quick Z-sphere sketch, I'm just using it to make some piping. And I'm going to hit Q, and I'm going to actually draw on here. And then I'm going to pull this out, holding W. And because probably the draw size is pretty tall, the actual balloon is going to, or the actual sphere, Z-sphere is going to actually move. So make it small and you can actually move it without moving the entire object. Might help. And I'm going to scale this guy down a little bit so they're both even. And then of course adding segments to this. The more segments you do to a polysphere, or a polysphere 3D, it's going to create different polygroups, right? So if I look at this, there's only like, what, one polygroup area, maybe two, because it's only two spheres. And of course, if I hit Q and tap on a link, it's actually going to add a segment. So I can take this and hit W and actually move upwards. Pull this up a little bit, and then I can do it again, and I'm going to just take this, and then I'm going to draw like maybe another Q, another sphere here, sorry, by hitting Q, same size, and I'm going to pull this apart. And maybe scale a few of these guys. Right, and so when I hit A to preview it, it's actually going to look something like this. And even if this is like, I mean, right now, actually its preview is showing with Dynamesh on it, like a Dynamesh resolution. But if you just want to work with like the simple polys, here's what you need to do. Hit A to get rid of the preview mode again. And then let's simplify it a bit by taking this and going, not polygroups, but adaptive skin, and then topology, of course, and then you hit A, and of course under this preview you can see the density and the Dynamesh resolution, and that's what you want to mess with. This is set by default to 256, but I would slide it back to 0, and then just change this density down to 1, and now when you preview it, it's just simple poly work, right? And if you took like just the end of this and cut it off, you could probably mirror it and then bridge the two pieces together and have like a complete roll bar, right? So that's why, like, you know, kind of I work out of symmetry sometimes, and just create one side, and then, you know, I'll flip it, right? So let's see if we can do that. Let's see. Make adaptive skin, and then back here on the subtool, I'm actually just going to append it back into here, which will be just the skin itself, not the Z-sphere. And then, of course, you know, the Z-sphere you can hide and keep it around because, you know, maybe if we want like a different shape, we could, you know, recycle the Z-spheres and use it again to build a different shape, right? So I'm going to take this guy and down. I'm going to hit dynamic solo just so I can see this shape along. And okay, so Q. I'm going to take and hide this, and hide this maybe. Oh. I know what to do here. Let's select lasso. Oops. There we go. Just taking off that end cap. If the preview is funky for this, it's probably just because the back faces are not being shown. But if you need to see your entire object, just a quick help, you can actually come down all the way to the bottom. I believe it's display properties and just show double, which should show doubles on the object so you can see the inside as well as the outside geometry. Let's see. I think if I do this, take this guy, oops. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to take this and delete the hidden. That way we don't, you know, we're just working with this shape with all the bits that I wanted to cut off. And then, let's see. Mask. Give me the mask lasso. Alright, and I'm going to reverse that. Actually, you know what? Do that. I'm going to grab this guy again. Alt and bring it up. And if you notice it's a bit at an angle. So I'm going to set the widget to be at about the same angle. And I actually want this where it's going to pair up, and when it flips, I want it to actually be a little bit straighter. So I'm just going to take this and bend it a little bit straighter. And then pull this guy inwards a little bit. Maybe not too far. Because actually what I'm going to do is take the entire part and mirror and weld it. But I don't want to weld it at the center because I think it would be a little bit off. So I'm actually just pulling it out just past the edge, right? I could bridge it, but actually let's try something really quick. Just take this and invert that mask, and again take this here, pull it inward. There we go. And just past the center line. So let's see what happens now if I take this and mirror and weld it. I'm going to go over to the Geometry tab and go to Modify Topology. Where was it? There we go. And mirror and weld. No, actually, if you do a mirror and weld, maybe I might need to turn off LSM. There we go. And now that works. And it actually has a line that's closer to the center, to where it joined it. So now, I don't know how much of this you might want to actually add loops, but, you know, maybe you could figure that out when you get to your editor or not. But at least, you know, probably here you can add some bevels later and get like a nice transition. So let's try that, actually. If I hit D, again with the dynamics div. That's the sort of roll bar that I can create and the softness that it has currently, right? So I think that's actually probably pretty good. It's just a blank shape for sketching, so let's continue and turn off dynamics, the dynamic solo, and turn off the transparency, turn off the polyframes for that, and so that'll be the roll bar at the top. So we have a nice little framing of the headpiece there. Actually, let's duplicate this. So I think I could probably use the shape again. I'm gonna hold shift and click. You can actually hold shift and it'll actually snap to the different varying degrees from when you rotate it. So like 10, 5-degree increments, going up. There we go. Maybe do something like that. There we go. And okay, so that's, I guess, one piece now. There we go. A little scaling, a little pushing. Looks okay. Alright. So actually, you know what? To the body, I actually might want to add some little mechanical details. So I'm going to try something really quick here. I'm actually going to take this and save a blockout OBJ of just like the head piece and the actual little body piece here. And we're going to experiment a little bit. I'm going to take this, everything that's visible, right? And I'm going to do a merge visible really quick. Minus our legs, actually. Turn those off really quick. I mean, basically I'm just doing a lot of like little minor look development things, right? So I've just had to have this piece here, and I want an extra copy of it with, just the head and the body. So I'm going to take it and actually just do a merge viz. I'll hold on to those UVs, I guess. And it will make a copy in my tool list, and that's the merged one, and as you can see, it's merged. I'm going to name this, rename it. Block out. Oops. ZB live. There we go. Please do, you guys, let me know if you have any questions again. I'm trying to pay attention to both ZBrush and the current chat, but yeah. SpiritChuck777, don't worry, you're good. I haven't gotten too far yet, and we have about 2 hours, so I'm just going to keep going. And then I'm going to export this guy and save it just really quick. Let's see. I'm going to go over to Blender for a minute, and I'm going to kill this shape. This is just a default scene from Blender. I'm going to delete that and hide this guy and this guy. That's a lamp and a camera, but not something that we need necessarily yet. So I'm going to take and do an import. File, import, wavefront, OBJ. Go find the file that I was just messing with. I believe that's here. Yep, there we go. Body blockout. There we go. Alright, so take that, bring it on over here. So of course, scale might be a little bit small. So you might want to grab an object and actually move it to scale if you need it to be to scale. That's usually something I save for last, like when I have like a whole grouping of objects. I'll make a box that is like real world scale, and then size the object up, and then try to change some of the proportional elements so that I can match any type of size that I really need to keep up with, right? So right now this mesh is actually fairly small, so I'm going to take it and just kind of pair it, maybe, you know, scale it, bring it up some where I think it should be. Every once in a while, between applications, scale gets a little bit messed up, but for whichever editor that you're using, if you trust that scale, I would probably try to take your model and match it to that real-world scale, right? Real-world scale, I recently had to do something in Maya in real-world scale, and it was an awesome learning curve to keep things on a specific, like, real-world, you know, size. So anyway, I'm actually going to take this and see if I can pull the parts apart, because it looks like they're grouped. So I'm just going to take and get these two pulled apart. So I'm going to hit tab and go into an edit mode, and then I'm going to hit P on the keyboard and do by loose parts, and that way we can hit tab again, and basically what we've got is our two separated pieces. And these were like really low poly, right? So one of the things that I wanted to do is kind of come over here and use box cutter to do some interesting cut work, right? And I also want to do a little bit of poly shaping, right? So every once in a while, you know, maybe if I grab a couple of edges and I'm going to do bevels on those, and then maybe I want to add loops so that I can keep this without, you know, having any ingons in it, you know, I can just do, like, you know, basic, you know, poly editing work here, right? So I'm going to try to do a couple of things. Nice little tight bevel there. One here, space that out. And of course, coming out of edit mode, there's my bevel. You know, Blender, that's one thing about Blender. It makes some really nice bevel work. Could have made that a little bit tighter, but for what it is, actually, if I wanted to smooth, you know, the whole thing, I could use like probably like a C# or something like that. You know, marked edges or something like that, and then smooth it. Might look good, but let's keep going. I'm going to hit the Alt-W. Oops. That is not box cutter. That is Mesh Machine, which is also another awesome tool. Alt-W. And then I'm going to hit D. And then I'm going to come in here on Custom. I'm going to choose it again and choose a box. And I can start making some little Boolean cuts, right? So one of the things that I want to do is I want to do these Boolean cuts on one side and have them affect the other in symmetry. By default, it's not going to do this. So one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to hit, sorry, let me hit escape on that. While it's selected, I'm going to actually hit Alt-X, and I'm going to mirror from this side. So what is this, like the -X, right? I'm going to flip it, and it's going to put a modifier on it so that everything that I do on this side will appear on this side, right? So once that's done, let's say I hit D, custom box, and then I'm going to actually hold Control and start cutting away a few boxes, right? Now, this is a nice cut box, but we can do greater things with a box than one probably even figures, right? So I'm going to hold actually Shift, which will hold this box's shape even after I commit the modifier, right? And then I can actually edit this shape if I wanted to, but I'm actually just going to hide it for now. So that's one cut. And then of course, you know, these edges are pretty raw as they are. So I'm going to actually hit Q, go to my hard ops menu. I actually want to view my viewport stuff with shadow. Alt V again and do AO, soft shadows. And it just gives it a nice look as I'm working, and I can sort of kind of tell where the details are sitting and where they are. But I'm also going to select the object, hit Q, and use some of the hard ops tools. Separate tool from Box Cutter. Fairly priced, actually, if you go looking for it, and you should. Look the guy up, Master Xeon 1001. It's good. He and his team, Team C, Proxy, they do great things with these tools to get them ready for people, looking to use Blender or modeling in general. It's a great concept tool. Anyway, I think I'm gonna do like a C sharpen maybe, and then hit this and do a B width, and that will actually, as I slide it out, give me just a little bit of a bevel on the edges. It might not shade right. Might have to cut some areas before I do some of that. Alright, let's go back for a second. I'm just going to click this. There we go. Yep, okay. I'm going to do a couple more cuts first. There we go. Yeah. Actually, no, that's using the actual custom. I just want to use a box. There's a new mode within Box Cutter that's great. It actually remembers the last set of cuts that you're making and turns it into a new cutter. And it's pretty fantastic to use, but I have to remember to sometimes put it on pause. So I'm going to hit, B and do like sort of a beveled box in here. And hold that shape and hide it. And these are all modifiers, so I can keep going. I can look at things in sort of a side view, and maybe use an Ingon tool, drawing tool, to make some interesting cuts. So I'm going to hit that, hit Ingon, hold Control. Hit X so I can change this, because the red box actually cuts in, the yellow box actually creates like a score line, and I'm going to hold shift and commit this guy, and then that way it's cut all the way through, right? I can hide it, keep cutting, and this is actually now a different shape technically. So let's see. Oops. Actually, I can't cut in on that side. I'm sorry. I need to flip it around. I need to remember that everything works off of one side. So I'm actually going to do it from this way and go this way. And I can reduce these edges here and then go E and push in. We can create some more shapes this way. Hide that. And of course it made it on the other side. And then this way we can, sort of add some more sort of like, complicated shapes to our already established silhouette, right? So I'm going to grab a little bit more of this. Do like this. Oop, actually, need to select it first, sorry. And right there what I did was just add what's called a T-thick, and it actually just adds, sort of like a space in between the square that's being cut in an inside box, like an inset box. And you can readjust that, make it smaller. And you can do the same by actually kind of turning a lot of those cuts into cutters themselves. You can make some really nice custom shapes with n-gons, and sort of a way to use it to make a custom shape is really interesting. You want to hit D, click on n-gon, click on the shape, and then what you want to do is hold Control and click once. You could do something like this. Just build like a sort of generalized shape. There we go. There we go. Now these look very kind of uneven, but even if I make this shape, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go ahead and commit it, but I'm going to extrude it in, and then we're going to see, we're going to go both sides. I'm just going to pause it. And so this is actually cutting through this, but there's an error on the back side, so actually I should have drawn this on the one side. My bad. 3 and then 9 will reverse the side view. There we go. Maybe same angle. And then I'll just hit Control, or actually Shift rather than Control, sorry. And I'll click it. I'll actually click on the mouse, the right click, and then I'll actually pause the shape. And now I can pull out a little bit with the scroll wheel, and hit E to extrude it. And it should go all the way through. Ah, see, no errors this time, because I started, my originating point was actually from its properly mirrored side, right? So I'm going to actually hold Shift, click this, and this shape can actually be edited. So I'm going to hit Tab, A, double A to deselect, and then I'm actually going to take, oh, actually, you know what? Let's take this and do a scale. Actually, I probably have to come out of edit mode for that. Let's do a scale on this. So S, and pull this using G and then the axis. G on the keyboard, Y forward, and G and Z. Bring it up, and we can kind of size it to kind of where we were, you know, or G, Z, and bring it downwards. Just kind of trying it a few different places to see where it visually sort of jams together. Why Blender? Well, one is it's free, and it's it has a great community, great support for it. Even though, I mean, you know, it doesn't have probably like official support somewhere, but it's a 2.8 has come a long way from 2.79. There's some great rendering stuff in there as far as real-time rendering. The tools, the poly editing tools, are, you know, very correct, pretty easy to use. As a platform, I like it. You know, I'm actually grown more in love with it than I do, you know, Maya or Max or anything like that. But not to hate, but you know, it's great. I would definitely recommend trying it. You know, I mean, especially, you know, like if you're a student, or you know, you're going to school or something, and you know, you can't afford the subscription to Maya or anybody else, then, you know, it's definitely an editor that you can get by on and sort of learn some of the fundamentals of doing, you know, 3D production, you know, and you can do everything in it. There's no element that is probably uncovered or a feature set that's lacking compared to a lot of other software. Dare I say, you can even sculpt in it. But as far as that goes, I do think that the tools inside ZBrush are, you know, a lot better for doing exact sculpting. So I'm not gonna say it's a replacement for anything by far. that. And let's see. Let's take a little. I'm gonna do like a little. What's called a laser cut here. Do a box and hit B. And if I just shift and click this, it'll actually laser cut away a shape inside of this with one go, right? And I can just hit H to hide, and I keep going, right? And so already, you know, as far as the shaping goes, we're way beyond than where we were a few minutes ago when I first brought it over, right? Actually, same thing again. Sorry, gotta remember. Let's do that. But I mean, besides Box Cutter, you know, there's a whole slew of like free and sometimes not free add-ons from our, Blender. I mean, there's a huge community and a huge following. You know. And okay, so I want to show you sort of a next level of cut, you know, than just doing a box with bevels, right? So I'm going to hide that. That's going to be there, and then I'm going to actually take and select the shape again, hit Control, do another box. Actually, let's do something kind of more patterned, right? So I'll make an extruded bevel, or actually, you know, Boolean cut in here. And one of the things that I want to do, oops, sorry, is once I push into it, I not only want to bevel it so that I have some rounded edges, but I want to hit Q as well and bevel the inside of that. And I can actually dial this back and sort of push in. And then I can repeat it by hitting V, which will actually repeat it along sort of like an axis. So I'm probably repeating on the Y. And I can hit Shift and click it, and my shape is still there, so it looks like it's a little forward. So I'll hit G, Y, and just skip it back just a tad, so it looks like it's even. And then I'll hide that, and then we have our shape. You know, I could put something else in here, like what if I put like a rivet or something on just like this corner piece? Well, I mean, not just boxes, but of course you can hit the D menu, hit a circle, and sort of dig in, hit Q, and that'll soften the inside of that, and it'll cut it away. Actually, I should probably turn this a little bit more. Hit Q, and then Shift, and click it. I didn't round it as much. Huh, that's strange. I'll have to figure that one out. But, you know, it's still this shape. I can move it and place it exactly where I want, and then I could create another detail, you know, to where I could nest something in there, or just leave it blank. Because basically what I'm trying to do is just create some geometry that's in the end going to be triangulated and then probably Z-remeshed. Some of the ways that I mentioned before, in fact, probably earlier steps where I was going to use hardops as a tool and actually take, you know, like say the geometry and actually add what was a C sharpen and then probably B width to actually get like a bevel. Actually, it's probably good that I don't actually bevel this. Because when I bring it over to ZBrush, it'll just be like a straight edge with no bevels, and it'll be handled better when I try to Z-remesh things. The reason for this is that these straight edges here, without any complicated bevel added to them, will actually probably smooth out a little bit better later along the process, especially after I use ZRemesher, because ZRemesher can, of course you use the polygroups menu in ZBrush, and of course if there's no less transitions, it's easier to grab it by the normal and actually do a polygroup by normal, so that every edge or surface, or planar transition will be just one edge and flat, right? And it's probably easier to polygroup it that way. So like if you want to break it apart or something like that. So say for example, right now I'm just going to take everything that we had. Oops, sorry about that. I'm going to take everything from here, and I'm actually going to use a modifier to batch modify and apply the bevels here, right? And so that means that everything is committed shape-wise, right? And if I hit tab on here, you can see, of course, the geometry is still mostly in quads, but it's got a few n-gons. I might have to make some cuts or something, or either save the whole thing triangulated, which is about what I'm about to do. So I'm going to take this. Oops. Come on, Blender. Don't be locking my shapes. Oops. Here we go. So I'm going to take this and just do an export really quick. Wait for an OBJ. Okay, and save it here. There we go. And right down here where it says operator presets, I'm going to set a few things. I'm actually going to grab it with the selection only, apply modifiers if there's any modifiers still hanging around. I just batched them, but I'm just going to turn it on as a good practice. Smooth groups, triangulate faces, polygroups. It'll actually write polygroups, and maybe in some instances you might want to keep the material groups, so I'll just go ahead and click it anyway. Yep, good to go. Alright, so I'm going to export it. That might be so. I haven't used the circle yet since the last update, but then again, and Blender updates happen like on the daily, several times a day. So sometimes it does help to have the most newest commit before you update your hard ops or add-ons in general, because sometimes they break stuff and then they fix it again. What may not work one day might a couple of hours from now, because they're constantly building the tool and doing several different commits a day, right? So okay, this has been exported. So I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to just look at this block out, and I'm actually going to just import it over this object. Go find it. Excuse me for one moment. I just had to crazy thing. A couple of different times every time it seems like maybe the last 2 times I did streams, I've been stuck with a cold. Craziness. Pardon me. My apologies. And okay, so let's find that mesh. So I'm going to go back, grab that, open it. It's a little larger this time. That's okay. And I'm going to kill the floor. And so if you can see, all of the details from the cuts actually held. Of course, I would usually take my time and do things a little bit more complex, but just to illustrate for you guys, that's sort of how you can sort of detail or soft detail, hardened shapes. And if you Shift F, all of this is going to be triangulated, but that's okay, because what we're going to do is we're going to look at this and see, oh, it's 3 pieces, right? 3 different polygroups for each cut piece of geometry, and then of course their faces. So if I select this, what I want to do is actually do a split by polygroup. So I'm going to go down here on the subtool menu and just click split, and split, usually it's split PG. Group split. There we go. Yes, okay. Always okay. And actually, that becomes one piece. So I'm actually going to just hide everything and just work with this one piece for a minute. And it's a tight little piece. There's a cut up here that might be a little hinky, but I'm going to try it anyway. See what ZBrush can do for something like this. I mean, this is pretty complex, right? So I'm going to come over to polygroups and do a group by normal and see what I get. So actually that's not too bad. Everything kind of grouped itself in the right order. I don't think there's anything that's the same. Let's try this. And I'm actually going to turn on symmetry and see if I can actually ZBrush this thing down, right? If you're working with some hardened edges, like every once in a while you can crease by polygroup and maybe get, you know, the absolute edges, you know, as hard as they can be. But for this, I'm just going to try to give it a go and see what happens. Groups by normal, that was 45 degrees. Okay. Let's see if we can get it. ZBrush, hide that. And of course, its target is 5,000. I'm actually going to keep groups. Bring that down to 0. Detect edges. Adaptive can be up, maybe. I'll try 90. Oops. Come on, you. 90. That's what I wanted. Alright. And curve strength, because I'm not using curves, I'm actually going to bring that back down. I have to do this again somehow. I must have undone it. There we go. Alright. So let's see now where ZBrush gets us. So not so bad. And I could probably keep reducing this. It made pretty quick work of it. Kept the groups, didn't make anything too nasty. And you could probably even lower this. But I think I'll keep going for this. Yeah, and there's your polys. Wow. It's quads. Okay. And so I'll just keep doing that for the next couple of objects. And then I could probably, you know, you can even double up on something like this and use some of the Booleans that, you know, you get with ZBrush, with live Boolean shapes. And you build, you know, over time you build up, you know, a real strong composition of, like, just different form language on a particular object, right? So I could sculpt this up if I wanted to. If I wanted to, I could probably, as I was mentioning, polygrouping by the entire thing to crease it. It's like a basically crease PG is what I wanted to do. That way, if I look at this now with no polygroups, of course it's, you know, it's got a little bit of faceting in there, but if I hit D, yes, always for that, and look at it, it's actually a pretty clean, hardened shape. You can even probably smooth some of these out and get a nice shape out of it, right? Or you could subdivide it, start, you know, using some alphas or what have you. In fact, I recently picked up some alphas that were pretty jamming from Vitaly Bulgarov, you know, like for hard surface stuff. Doing something like this where you just needed like a shape out of it, and then, you know, applying the alpha changes, you know, sort of the look of it. You can add something like that. So it's pretty cool. But this is just a sort of the flow that I've been working with, you know, doing things or editing things using Box Cutter and Blender, bringing those pieces back to ZBrush, and then Z-remeshing them so that, you know, I can retain some of their perfect shape from triangulation. And then maybe, you know, from here it's actually easier a look if I shift D and I go over to my Z plugins. At least this way, when I use UV Master, I can, do by symmetry and polygroups, and then I can actually take this and unwrap it, and then I can flatten it, and I can see how, all of my polygroups are. These are just general shells. You might even take it into, Rism, Unfold 3D, or Hedis if you'd like. But I mean, at least it's quads and it's polygrouped, and therefore, you can probably get some more decent packing order and probably take that and texture it to town, right? So I'm just gonna unflatten that, and now this piece actually has some UVs on it, right? So as you work through your hard surface objects, it actually can be pretty easy to just put like a UV shell on this, doing this method. Let's see. Make a UV map. Of course, if you morph your UVs, it'll show you how the UVs look. And I would probably change this to 4096? Or is it 4096 or 4098? I have a hard time remembering this. 4096. Sounds right. And then, your map border. Go 8. Yeah, so that's not so bad. Now let's try some of the other pieces. Grab this guy at the bottom, and then we'll do that one. Not sure what that face is or where it came from, so I'm going to delete it. Must be something extra. Okay, so now we have the bottom piece of the headpiece. Same thing. Let's see what we can do. Don't want that. Don't want that. Don't want that. Want this. Do that. And I just want to check these little areas where there's maybe that circle there. Every once in a while these come out a little bit funky, but I think it should be alright. It's not too overly complex or anything. It looks like the polygroup by normal did its job. Yeah, okay. So go back up here and merge, not split. I actually want to do mesh. Same deal. Keep groups. Bring that smooth group all the way down to 0. Detect edges. Keep the target poly count the same. But actually, you know what? You might even be able to lessen this. What if I went, I could use 5 as a default, but if I change it upwards, I believe the resolution is going to increase. But if I change it downward, it should probably give me a smaller poly count or something like that. So, what if I use 3.5 or something? Turn the adaptive and go 80, and curve strength 0 because there are no curves. But just to let you know where curve strength could apply is if you have like a very simple shape, with a lot of straight edges, you can actually go over to the stroke menu and scroll down here. On the curve mode, curve functions, actually it's curve functions. For the polygroups, you could actually do this, either creased edges or polygroups or border, but in this case I'm going to use polygroups. Just click on frame mesh, and it'll actually frame, the mesh in a lot of instances. I think this one is a little bit sloppy because there's so many different edges. Because it was triangulated, it's probably not going to work out very well. But after this, if I ever needed to, ZBrush it again, I could probably frame it and then use one of the algorithms inside of the ZBrusher to, haggle the polys down a little bit. Anyway, okay, so let's just do this. Yes, 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 and yes. Let's try it. So a little funky right here. Let's go back and maybe do 5 again. And we'll change this to 90. That's cleaner. Actually, not as many polys as I thought it would be. Yeah. Okay. So, we're going to do like a crease again. Split. Merge. Where did it go? Where did it go? Crease. Here we go. And, of course, crease tolerance itself, you could actually change these values and sort of get sort of like a rounded look. So if these, you know, like say the edges here are already, you know, there's no beveling or anything on it, but when you crease it, if you turn down the crease level a little bit, like say if I did, instead of its default, it's 15, if I did that, say maybe 4, and bring the crease tolerance down a bit, I think this should probably be like 3. Can't remember. No, actually, gotta back up. Let's do this. Let's do 55 and 3. See where it ends up. And if I crease it, and then I do the dynamic subdiv, just by hitting the D key, and Shift F. Sometimes it could look a little bit rounded. I think it looks actually a little sloppier just right here. And, you know, in some areas it doesn't always work out. Yeah, it kind of takes a little dip, or maybe it pinches there. But you can sort of toy with it, your creasing level, and get, you know, sort of a different, you know, shaded look from it. Probably using like a wrong number. 45, let me try 4. And do crease by Polygroup. There we go. So that's unshaded, or unsmooth rather. Turn off this Polygroup, hit D again, and it smooths it out, but probably the subdivision level is not that great, so maybe I need to crank that up. So I'll go to dynamic subdiv and crank it up to maybe 4, something like that, and it might smooth out some of the edges a little bit. I always try to, like, you know, do a little bit of a bevel on the creasing, because then that way, you know, nothing looks exactly hard edged like that, you know, that's manufactured. It's always like a more of a softer rounded edge or something like that, but you can sort of toy with it. But yeah, I mean, there's again our poly frames with, you know, everything marked out, and then of course I can just UV this really quick. I'm just gonna Shift D, come out of smoothing that, go ahead and actually go to the Z plugin, UV master again. And of course, polygroup it. You could work this way, where, you know, if you have polygroups of stuff, you know, you can pluck out, you know, areas that should probably be better UV'd that way. But I'm just going to do a polygroup symmetry unwrap. Bam, done, over, and flatten it, and you can see all your pieces, all the islands. You could probably repack that, get it clean, and you're good to go. All right. Oops. Let's go back. Need to unflatten. And of course, that same, you don't always have to unflatten. Of course, you know, from the UV palette over here, UV map, you can always morph UV, and it'll kind of show you what your UVs look like. All right. And then you'd be good to go. Any last minute questions going into our last 15 minutes? Alright, let's do this last piece here. Oops. Should sculpt like a bag or something in between here. and have like a sort of soft neck instead of an actual full mechanical neck in between the head and body. But we'll see. But I mean, as far as the pieces being paired together, these two pieces here are already, you know, polygrouped, UV'd. I'm gonna come over here. Oops. Turn this on. Actually do dynamic solo on this guy. Go back again. I'm just gonna show you guys this. You can try it out on your own after the stream. But polygroups, group by normal, right? This time I'm actually grabbing a few surfaces that look like they're kind of falling together. Like, I don't know if this is a different polygroup. This one versus the side, I think, is one. And these two purple spots here are probably blending together. So let's try a few different little values here and see if what we get. This was set for 45. I'm going to try 8. 12. Let's do 20. There we go. That's a little tighter, and that's different, and that's different, and that's different. Sweet. Let's try it this way. Alright. So just as long as like every surface has like a different group, that's kind of what I push for. Here, this transition, kind of iffy, but I would probably keep playing with the numbers until I get it exactly right so that, you know, all of the groups look the same. But for time's sake, let's just go ahead and try it this way. I'm going to go in and do the ZBrush, keep it the same way, same setting. There we go. Detect edges. Yep, worked out. I can do that. I can do that for sure. For sure. All right. And then yep. Yep. Everything's flattened. Looks good. And then this way, you know, even if I keep the UVs and I subdivide this a little bit and then I start sculpting and clipping away some pieces, at least, you know, I can define a high and a low poly mesh, and then bake off of it, you know, with you know, fairly quick UVs on it, and sort of experiment and sort of look, concentrate more on the look of things, and the shape of things, the visual language of things, before I start, you know, getting too hard and heavy with baking and texturing and stuff. So that will be that. But this will be a two-parter. Next time, next stream around, I think, just because I'm a little short on time this time, and we'll soon need to get going, but I'm going to keep building on this and come back in next stream. Sorry, I haven't had much of a schedule to stream of late, and so I know I've probably had only a few of them come out each month over the last couple of months, but trying to clear my schedule a little bit between work and family, and have some time to stream with you guys. Always fun. How many nibs do I go through? On this pen, not too many yet. I just started using an XP pen recently, and I'm not going to say it's changed my life or anything, but it is cool. Let's get back to our legs. What did I do with the legs? I forgot what I did with the legs. Oh, okay. So these guys, you know what? Alright, I know what I'm going to do. Take this and come back here. Actually, you know what? I want to redo those legs. So let's just come back and work off of this body. Of course, if you ever wanted to do booleans, I should probably show you this, guys. For those that are new to ZBrush, or just got it started working with it, you can actually make shapes and use them as Boolean shapes inside of ZBrush alone. And I should probably be fair enough to show that, so I will. I'm actually going to come back over this way, and I'm going to go BI and grab one of my primitive insert mesh brushes again. Where is it? Primitives, and then I'll do something like a cylinder shape, right? And if I draw this on the surface, of course, it's not on both sides because I forgot to hit X, but I'm going to go ahead and just try to work on one side and then mirror it again. So I'm going to just split this off, and actually I'm going to do a mirror and then mirror and weld, and I do that by doing deformation, mirror, and then I'm going to come over here to modify topology and do a separate mirror and weld. And this way I can hit X now and everything is in the same place. So I'm going to hit move tool, and I'm just going to kind of push this so it intersects just a little bit, right? Yep, should be intersecting. Okay, so now if I come in, I can actually make this a cutter inside of ZBrush now, because if I show this by polyframe and I get Q and I go into B, Z, Zmodeler, and let's say just for the whole edge loop I do a bevel, right? And I do a single row of bevel, that should be fine. Edge loop, partial or complete. I'm going to do the complete and just take this and do just like this, right? Maybe I want something a little bit more extreme, so I can grab and lasso all of the top. Actually, you know what? Let me do that again. Oh, I know what the problem is here. I need the square. Alright, so I'm going to hide everything up to the top, right? So I just want that round top of the cap, and then I'm going to hit Control W to polygroup it into its own, and then I'm actually going to grab the widget, pull it out of the way again, and just hold, if I hold Control and click on there, it's going to mask off and just give me like that one polygroup, and I can raise it up a little bit without having to be destructive on the rest of it. And then I can intersect this again, and this will be the shape of my cutter, right? So I'll pull that into the face, and then I'm going to actually come up over to the render tab and render booleans, live boolean, and then I'm actually going to take this shape and make it a start object, which you do here by clicking this down arrow. So I think, oops, that's the head. Actually, that's not the start. This should be the start, and this actually I'm going to kick downwards under that object and make this a start, and these will be negative, right? So as long as I turn off the polyframes, Shift F, you can actually see the cutter in motion, right? And you can actually even view this cutter with dynamic subdivision on it. So if you get some faceting or anything like that, or you know the polys look too low, you want to look at it, you know, you pull it inside, and you can actually commit this to the rest of this, because this will be the start object, and then this is either positive or negative or intersecting. Again, of course, this icon is the poly paint, so if you turn it on or off color, you know, vertex color, then you can do it that way. But yeah, it's pretty easy to do, but that's kind of how a live Boolean shape would work in ZBrush. I encourage you guys to try it out, because you can do some actually pretty interesting stuff with it. And of course, these are two separate different pieces of mesh, but if you go down to the Boolean and you make Boolean Mesh, it'll actually make a duplicate tool that has the Boolean applied. And so I'll just take this and hit append. Oops. Come on, don't be too jumpy. Okay, there we go. And where is it? Oh, I must have this wrong tool selected. I'm sorry. I actually grabbed the wrong little piece of mesh there. these two guys. You could actually probably put these in a folder and then make a Boolean mesh from that. Believe that's correct. New folder. Put that start object in there. And then you could put this guy on the bottom of that. And then I think if you hit this cog, you can actually do a Boolean folder, and it should actually make a copy with the Booleans already applied. I think it just looks kind of weird because it's stacked one on top of the other. That's why it looks like camo or something like that. But there's another... There's another object. This U-mesh. Anything that says U-mesh is probably like a Boolean mesh. Ah, yes, there is ZBrush Core at 150 bucks. ZBrush is not necessarily freeware, but I mean, ZBrush Core is a more like light version of it that has a lot of the sculpting features in it. It's certainly worth it if you're considering going pro, but you can try it out and use it before you spend the money, that sort of thing. But anyway, yeah, that's kind of where I may leave things. And then next time, of course, you know, we're gonna do a little bit more additions and get this UV'd, and I'm gonna actually show you my process for texturing this sort of thing and working it up so that maybe we can drop this in someplace very meaningful and relevant. I've been messing around with Unreal lately, so there's a lot of assets that I want to actually take forward and sort of share the experience with you guys. And you know, keep up some projects that I have going still, actually, that I haven't had time to touch, but all of them involve ZBrush, and I would love to share my workflow with you guys. But at any rate, I'm going to get going. Thank you for joining me. Any last questions before I dip? You going to stick with Blender for now? That's probably a smart move. But Blender and ZBrush, you can do some amazing things, dude. It's all about the workflow of how you use some of these great software. So, I mean, definitely, probably at the top of the pyramid, ZBrush is one of those. Alright, guys. Well, cheers, and thanks for joining me again on this rather lazy Saturday afternoon. I hope you guys have a good weekend. Happy Memorial Day. Mad respect to all the fallen. Peace. Thanks for joining me again, guys. Bye-bye.